we've noticed over time, Corey and I, that when we're working with a household, there's all kinds of things. They're just normal that we split up. We do it in our own households. These things ebb and flow. Like, okay, you're going to take care of the kids during the day. I'm going to go earn an income. Or we're both going to go earn an income, but I'll drop the kids off in the morning. You pick them up in the afternoon. Usually, both spouses are not, if there's a housekeeper, both spouses are not reaching out to the housekeeper. It's like one person. There's all these areas that we, do the old divide and conquer to get everything handled. I'll go to the baseball game. You go to the taekwondo match, like that kind of stuff. And those all work pretty well. But in this area around money, oftentimes there is not a divide and conquer, not a let's both be in the conversation. In fact, it's like abdication. I think too often, at least in our experience, it's like 90% of the time, if the man is given the option, he will do the meetings without his wife. And we allow that, but only after they've gone through our initial coaching with both spouses. Because the last thing we want is for something tragic to occur, and it's the first time that she's getting to know us. And we let them know that up front. That's more of a lifestyle thing for us. That sounds like such a horrible experience for us to have. We're just going to protect ourselves against it and thereby protect the client. But what nobody does ever is says to their spouse, hey, you raise the kids. I mean, I'm okay with kids, but a lot of fluids come out of these little suckers. And they're kind of rude. And I have to tell, like, they're evil. You got to tell them, like, say thank you. I bet I've told my 3 children, say thank you, between me and my wife, probably 100,000 times. And not one of them's even 10 years old yet. What in the world is a matter with these? Now, of course, I love them and I parent and I don't do this. But imagine if I looked at my wife and said, okay, listen, I really like teenagers. I'm not a super big fan of all these very short teenagers that people have. So if you would, you just take care of this and then I'll engage with it when they're teenagers. That's the equivalent of what many spouses are doing and saying, you handle all these long-term financial decisions and then let me know when it worked out. And my question is, why?
So, I think part of it is the divide and conquer, right? I do think that is a real thing. Nobody sits around and sings kumbaya about the finances, right? I mean, they just say, great, you've got that handled. Yeah, you do. No.
Just Corey and I, whenever we're together in person.
On a Friday night.
Drum circle. Yeah.
But Rhonda, even the divide and conquer, like you can divide up paying bills and one could take on that work. But really what it means more often is one person's paying bills and the other one has no idea what the house is actually spending on half the things they're spending on.
Yes.
Right.
And that's where it's like divide and never talk about.
Right.
Right?
That's a new branded concept right there.
Right.
Divide and hope for the best. Maybe that'd be another podcast we could do.
Right.
So, and I know that we have, Paul and I have chatted about this before, but Prudential actually did do a longitudinal study. They did one in the early 2000s, and then they did another one in 2010. Basically, what they were looking at was women's attitudes and beliefs about money and their involvement in making long-term decisions. The data was showing same, right? Like they feel very confident in doing the day-to-day stuff. We know that women are making 80% of the purchases. So they're making purchases, they're handling the bills, blah, 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 right? But once we get outside of that target center and we look at insurance or we look at savings or we look at estate planning or whatever, women are putting their head in the sand. And basically the summary of that study was, okay, well, what ultimately provides confidence for women? It's knowledge, right? Understanding the concepts, the terminology, but then also the experience. And I feel like, early on in my career in the financial industry, I was doing a good job of the knowledge piece. The problem was the experience was coming back. That's where, the work at home begins, right? Like that's where women have to have that experience to build their confidence. And I'll give you an example. So a couple of years ago, it was time to retire the soccer mom van, right? You're like, oh my gosh, this thing's got 200,000 miles. I'm done with it already. And so I decided that Tim and I decided we were going to, go car shopping and get a vehicle. Well, he was super busy and I'm like, listen, I have some time today. Why don't I just buzz over there? Well, what I do in those situations is I put myself in a situation where I'm a single woman. right? I'm walking into the dealership. What's my experience? What am I looking at? And so by the time, and I test drive the vehicle, I'm like, okay, I found the one. So we come back, right, later that day to meet with the, finance team, do all the paperwork, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And Tim looks at the guy, the finance manager behind the desk, and says, hey, I got a question for you. He says, how often do you have women come in here purchasing vehicles when the husband doesn't actually even know what we're purchasing? And he thinks this is hilarious, right? Like he gets a kick out of it, And the guy behind the counter just goes white, like, oh my gosh, now, I did something wrong, right? And Tim's like, oh, no, I'm just kind of curious, So we
That's
settled
the answer right there.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, And so we get out to the vehicle, and he's like, I give him the keys, and he drives home. He's like, oh, good choice, but here's the thing: if my husband had not afforded me the confidence and opportunity to gain the experience, have the confidence I need, I now know that if something happened to him, God forbid, right, I could step into that role and say, I bought a vehicle before. I'm comfortable going to the dealership, right? Mm-hmm. So I think there's this opportunity for the men to afford their wives the opportunity to learn and grow with a safety net, right? Like, hey, if something totally went south, I knew that I could call him, right? But at the same time, I also now know that if something does happen to him, I have that experience that I can draw on. And I think that's where the confidence comes in.
Well, and the thing that I think about a lot, we have an application process. So if somebody wants to consider becoming a client of ours, we share with them our philosophy, or what we may redub the unretirement talk that we give our clients. Yeah, that's the first time Corey's heard that.
Yeah, I've never...
I just tell Corey new things on the podcast.
To hear more about our new business initiatives. But I love it.
So but the idea that everybody knows, in fact, everybody's working toward, like, I put money in my 401k, I'm saving money, they do those things. But then when we ask how much capital at work is going to be required for you to be financially independent, it's part of our application, only like 1 in 20 people have an answer, and almost always that answer is the number we use in a case study in that philosophy conversation that we gave them prior to them applying. So the thing that I think about is people are not preparing for what is nearly inevitable, in this case, retirement, like not even knowing how much the number ought to be. They're just doing some action toward it. Almost certainly, for the women listening, you are going to outlive your husband. Almost certainly. Second, husbands, your wives are almost certainly going to outlive you. And we've had a chance to work with some of those widows. And I know that you think you're doing the right thing. I know you think you're caring for them and handling stuff that they don't have to handle. But right now, you like talking to a woman who's been through her entire careers in her early 60s, lost her husband untimely. And she's like, I have no idea. And it was like, okay, here's what a mutual fund is. Here's how your car insurance works. Now, it wasn't, and she's not a fool. It's just a whole domain she's never touched. She's picked up on it quickly. But to your point, Rhonda, if you're ever without him, I would say odds are you're going to be without him one day. Just statistically speaking, women live longer. Period. End of story. One day, every woman listening to this podcast, even happily married and married for the rest of their husband's life, their husband will not be married to them the rest of their life. You'll have to deal with your finances alone one day. You don't want to be learning it at 75. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, ring that bell, and by the way, make sure to share this video. I don't know if you know this, but my cyborg body runs 100% on YouTube views and likes. Please don't let my batteries die.